Hello, everyone. I'm Danae Green, a project consultant here at Transform Consulting, and I'm joined by...
Hi, everybody. It's Amanda Lopez, president here at TCG.
All right. Well, it's just now getting started here live, and so I know people are popping on, so we'll give a few minutes for everyone to kind of join us.
Yes.
As we do our first ever live episode of our podcast.
Yeah. I feel like it's really exciting. We've conquered the technology here today. So when Amanda first told me we were going to do a live event, I said, what does that mean?
What does that entail? Like, what do I have to learn? How do I have to do this? But we figured it all out, and we're joining here today totally live, and we got a lot of good information for you around data and funding. And so we'll get into that here shortly. And if you're new to this podcast and you're new to us, we've got some basic information here to start off with. And first off, Transform Consulting Group started this podcast as a mini joke between a data analyst teammate of mine and me. We did a whole data project, and we were talking about, people just like to whine about their data. And then we were laughing because we're like, well, we like to drink wine and talk about data.
Yeah.
And then we made all these notes on a piece of paper. And then our marketing specialist and marketing manager, Amanda Shorgen, was like, what is this? This is a great idea for a podcast. And so here we are today. This whole thing turned out all because of notes on a Google Drive.
Yes, having a conversation. But I think really one of our overall philosophies here at TCG and the clients that we work with is we really try to simplify and demystify data and hopefully bring people the confidence and the tools that they need to use their data. And that data is for good and it's for learning, not to be punitive. It doesn't have to be complicated. And so we thought having a podcast would be a really fun way to hopefully provide that knowledge and information.
And we nailed it with our Shark Tank.
Yes, you guys made a pitch to me, Shark Tank style. And I said, deal.
You said deal. Yeah, we literally had a whole Shark Tank pitch. It was awesome. And yeah, it really was. It's like, how do we make this fun? How do we make this bite-sized, something that's application-based, a place where people can learn.
Yeah.
And then use it and, everyday kind of stuff. So, but real quick, Amanda, since I'm here with the founder, we'll just ask her, you started this when? When did you start TCG?
2008. So we're getting close to our 20 years here, which is wild to think about that. But I started the firm with just this goal to want to come alongside organizations in the public sector, nonprofits, government agencies, education agencies, and foundations to help them do what they're doing, but better, and give them the tools, knowledge, and resources to be able to do that. So we do a lot of work around data and helping make sense of data and helping how data can be used to tell your story of impact or need and celebrate your success. And we also do a lot of other things around capacity building, like strategic planning, board leadership, and then lastly around collective impact.
Yeah.
And bringing lots of people together to rally around a common cause. So TCG is based in Indiana, but we work nationally, and we have a team across really the Midwest and East now.
Can you believe it? 20 years ago, and here's where you are today with the team across the state or in the nation.
Yeah, it's really exciting just to see, and so rewarding because all the clients that we work with are mission oriented. So, you are all doing good. And so we love to help you just do it even better.
Awesome. Well, you know what I think? I think that deserves a cheers. Cheers to you.
Yeah.
And since we are talking about wine and data,
yes.
What are we drinking?
Yes. So I love to share different wines. And obviously we've been highlighting different wineries in the Midwest, which people may not think. We're not California, but there's some good wines here. I had to pick a winery from Indiana. So Oliver Winery, for those who are from the Midwest, it's a beautiful winery down in southern Indiana, close to Indiana University. And they have a really great outdoor area. So it's a great place to have a picnic. But they have a variety of wines. They have a lot of sweet wines, which is not my palate. But this is a really great red blend. So it's a nice, for the folks who are dipping their toes into red wines, I feel like it's a good start. Did you try it? What do you think?
No, I haven't tried it yet. Yes, delicious.
It's really smooth, kind of almost light, but fruity, but not sweet or too dry.
Yeah, it's like a perfect mix. So far, when we've shoot these episodes and you brought the wine, they've all been good.
Yeah.
So good job, Amanda.
It is definitely a perk of my job now. And I tell my husband, we need to go try these wineries because I need lines for our episodes, for our podcast. So
it's also kind of like what my husband said to me. Like, what are you doing today? And I was like, I get to talk about data, hang out with Amanda, and drink some wine. He's like,
plus, it's like end of the day. Although, please feel free to join us with whatever your beverage of choice is. So coffee, water, whatever that might be.
yeah, totally. All right. Well, I mean, as much as they want to just hang out with us,
We do want to give like some meat substance here.
there was a specific reason they all chimed in, not
Yes.
just to listen to us chat. And so with that, I think, really today's live episode is all about data and funding.
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. No, I don't have any music or anything to go with it. But I think really this all came about as we were planning this episode. We kind of were like, this is it, Amanda. We're going to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And a lot of this come from the conversations we're having with clients right now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been an interesting start to 2025.
Right.
Funding has been a topic of conversation for many years, obviously, but is really at the forefront right now. And so today's the day. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So like you said, Danae, 2025 is taken off to an interesting start to the new year, new leadership in office. And so there's been, a lot of potential changes to especially federal funding and in some states, some of their state funding. And so I think it's facilitating a lot of uncertainty and questions around, what do we do if we lose this funding?
Right.
Or maybe we've already started to lose that funding to some changes. And so anyone who leads a nonprofit knows your funding is not guaranteed and you're always hustling, for lack of a better word, to raise your money. So data has always been a powerful tool, and even more so, I think, today, to help make the case for your support.
Yeah. And so I guess, maybe just kind of like starting off for when you think about funding in general, how would you frame that? You kind of our buckets and what we talk about with our funding.
Yes. So when we do talk about, depending on your nonprofit organization, you want to have diversity of funding, no matter what. But we talk about there's 5 main types of funding, typically for a nonprofit organization. You have your individual donors, so individuals who are giving to you at various levels. It could be $25 up to major gifts of 6 figures, right? And then you have sponsorships. Those are corporate partners who are willing to partner with you. And a lot of times there's this exchange of services or goods, right? You're going to build awareness or marketing or PR for that corporate business, maybe naming rights, et cetera. So that would be another type of funding source. The third type is grants. And so for many organizations, this is kind of timely right now because of the potential change of funding, right? And so even within the grant sector, we break them up into 2 categories. We have government funding, and then you have private grants through foundations, of various types of foundations. So especially organizations that receive those government funding for those grants that might be cut or removed or changed or time limited. That's where some of that instability is coming from. But the other, 2 buckets are also around fees for services. And so that's also sometimes in the government funding where you have contracts. So you have an agreement with a party, and it could be with a government agency to provide foster care services or healthcare services or benefits. And so you have an agreed upon rate for that service, but it could also be a fee for service that you charge. Like the YMCA has memberships. And so that's a fee that they're paying as a member, and they get the service of access to the Y. And then the last bucket of funding that we think about is fundraising events. Yeah. So that's where you're putting on, galas, 5K runs, et cetera, to raise your funding. And so not saying that every nonprofit needs to have funding from every source, because we can have a whole other training, and we have lots of resources that we'll link in the show notes that talk more about those funding sources, because there's pros and cons with each of them.
Yes.
And there's things that you can do and can't do with those sources. So for us, we like to say, what do you want to do for your organization? Do you want to grow your programs and services? Do you want to grow internal infrastructure? Do you need to raise money for capital? And depending on your goals, the funding might change.
Yeah, and even how you're set up and
Right.
what kind of skills you also have in your organization and all the different things.
Some take more time. Going after grant funding, you have to be really organized, detailed, you have to write.
Yeah. And so I think that's where I kind of gave you that overview of that funding, because I thought that really leads us into the next meat and potatoes of our conversation here, which is really how do we use data then in those funding? And so I don't know, I guess just once again, what's that overlaying premise here, right? When we talk about data and funding.
Yeah. And I think when we were prepping for this earlier, Amanda cut us off and said, wait, save it for our ideas should start and have a conversation. But most of our nonprofits have a case statement. It's a document and it tells the story and it's making the case for why somebody should support your organization. Typically, you use a case statement when you're maybe meeting with an individual, sometimes with a company for a sponsorship, sometimes with a funder like a foundation, that type of thing.
Well, how do you lay out your case statement, Amanda? It's one of my favorite things about TCG. So I'm just going to make you tell us.
Yes. I guess we love to have like formulas. I feel like if you can break it down into like a couple of steps, it makes it like it simplifies the process. But when we approach developing case statements and supporting clients, I think about it in 3 buckets. So 3 sections of your case statement that you should typically have. And it may not always flow this way. Some people like their own like structure, but there's what I call like the past. So tell a little bit about why did your organization start? So like it's a little bit of the history of the organization. So if you're not currently the one leading it, somebody had an idea, saw a need in the community and said, there is a reason that you need to exist. There's a need in the community that's not being met. And we can come together and do that through a charitable and nonprofit organization to meet that need. So in that historical overview, you should have data. I'm going to talk about how do you weave your data into your case statement, which is a critical part. And so you pull in your data to tell the need in your community. So it might talk about, depending on if you're child welfare or doing foster care services, thinking about where you worked before today, talking about kids who are in the foster care system and what the needs are and why maybe there's nobody else in the community to be able to serve those needs, or maybe there's a specific subpopulation within the foster care world with youth that you're wanting to focus on and serve those needs. So that really provides good context and background to explain kind of how did the organization come to exist? What was the need then? Then you're going to move into present day. So what has your organization been doing to meet the need? So that's where you can summarize your programs, both as we talked about in a previous episode, or we'll talk about here coming up, actually outputs and outcomes. So talking about, who are you reaching? And maybe what the unmet need is. So, you're reaching out to this population, you've been providing these services, here's the impact of what you've been able to accomplish. So you're using your data to tell the story of what you've been doing to meet that initial need. Then you move into the last section, which is future. And so that's where we pull in our data to say, here's where the unmet need is. Here's where the gaps are. So we have been doing this, but there's still all of these youth or children who are not being served. Or maybe they're not being served well, or there's this new need that we've identified and nobody's meeting that need. And so we need your support to help do X, Y, and Z. But you can see how data is used throughout, both maybe some community data or what we would call like external and public data, but then your organization's data. And so by weaving it throughout, it really helps to build that story.
So, really kind of what we're also talking about today isn't just like one specific funding. There's no magic answer right now. We're not going to give you some revolutionary, tip or trick here today that's just going to solve all of, the funding woes of our sector. That's not really the goal here.
Right.
I mean, really the conversation we want to have is really around that data storytelling, which is what you're really explaining. And even with your kind of that case statement example, you really were giving that story.
Right.
And so, I guess, what are some other tips and strategies do you have right now, in this like uncertain time that we have around kind of these data storytelling?
Yes. So, and I think you teed that up really well today too, because while some are really focused on government funding and the uncertainty there, certainly these are tips that you can use across all types of funding that you're working to secure for a variety of programs, whether or not they're supported by government funding or other funding sources. Because like we just talked about, that case statement typically is used more in the private sector with donors and private foundations, but it's a great template. So we have had several of our clients reach out to us and say, help. We want to talk to legislators, or we want to talk to other community partners to help them understand why this government funded program is really important. And so I think if you're trying to do that right now, the best thing that we would recommend doing is to, one, figure out who's your audience. We always say that with our data storytelling, like no matter internally if we're doing a project for a client, but like who is the audience that's going to receive this data and who the information is for. Depending on your audience, you're going to frame and package your information differently that makes sense for what their goals are and what is best suited for them. For one of our clients, their audience was legislators. They were meeting with their representatives to educate them on the importance of their programs and services. So that was our audience. And then the next thing is to, I would say, audit. I'm like the Marie Kondo of data, like less is more and synthesize. But truly, we find most nonprofits are swimming in data and information. Like there's a lot of information we're collecting, and it can be overwhelming, both for your staff when you're trying to package and organize it, but then sharing it with people, especially when it's not their day job. You know, they don't live and breathe your work and your program and your lingo. So they may not understand like all the technicality of things. So we just said with this client, especially when we did this kind of one-page brief for them, what are the key things that are important to them, like the questions that they have or they have heard, and what is data that we have that's really simple that can answer that. And so that was our next step. And then the third step with your data when you're presenting it and trying to make the case is provide context. Again, remember, who is your audience? They're probably not the subject matter expert. Like they don't know your industry, especially if it's a potential funder or a legislator who's not working day to day in your world. And so they don't know if you're providing a data point of what the need is in your community or the impact of your results. Like, how does that compare to other communities? How does that compare to other 4-year-olds or 8th graders or other youth in your community? So with this client, we took their data, but then we pulled in external data to help provide that context to say, hey, this organization is doing better than other organizations doing the same thing. So they're a high quality, high standard. Or look at where the kids started before they came to their program to the end of the year and see how much growth they've made. And now they're on track, you know, to enter kindergarten, because it was an early childhood preschool program. So all of that helps to tell your story, you know, on the significance. So we really kind of have to walk them through. And I think sometimes when we work with nonprofits, we forget that people don't know all that detail. And so you want to spell it out for them. Yeah, we live in it every day. And so it makes sense to us. And it, you know, so we just did a couple of key sections on this one-pager sheet. And then we pulled in some of that external data for that context. And then we made really simple words and visuals.
And then they used that then to go out and have their conversations. Yes. And that was all within the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, we did that in a week.
Yeah.
It was very, very fast.
Now
they're a long-standing client. We already had their data. Yeah. But I think that's something that you can do with your own or, you know, your own data. And there are, you know, state associations and national associations who are putting out data and putting out templates that, you know, other organizations, you can replicate that and, you know, reuse and make it, you know, custom and make it your own for your organization. But I would say those are my main tips. Who's the audience who you want to share this information with? What are a couple of key main data points that resonate with the questions out there, the concerns, the issues, you know, the topics? Like this organization, they don't typically report about this, but we talked about how many people they employ. Yeah. And so we also talked about what's the economic impact if they lose their jobs for that region. And so again, knowing that audience, that was an important indicator for them to tell their story. So know your audience, what are the data points, and then pull in context to make it meaning. And then my fourth point is make it visual, as we like to say, zhuzh it up, pretty it up. But again, it goes back to your audience. So we know like the legislator, they only have time for one page. Like they can't go on, it can't be a really technical chart, you know, with multiple line graphs or any of that. So we have to just get to the point. Yeah, readable. And so you can immediately see these are the takeaways.
Have you heard back from them? Like, have they used it?
Yes, they've been using it and meeting with representatives.
Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about like the private side of, you know, how to use a case statement and some data storytelling there in some ways. We talked a little bit more about like this like federal funding side.
Right.
Let's see. Let's talk about another one. Like Turnstone is another example.
Yes.
And so you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. This is such a great project because we worked with a nonprofit that provides services to support individuals with disabilities and really helping to improve their quality of life and their independence. They had more of an innovative concept of how to use data, which we were super stoked about to partner with them on. It's called Social Return on Investment. So SROI. You might be learning a new acronym today.
I mean, our fields are loaded with acronyms, so why not add another one in, Amanda?
But I mean, it's truly brilliant because if you think about it, you know, in the private sector, for-profits are focused on the return on investment, right? If you're running a business, you're constantly crunching the numbers of like, how much time does it make to make this widget and all the costs? And then what can I sell it for? And then that's my return on investment, my ROI. In the nonprofit sector, right, we're not making widgets. We're, working with humans. But, nonprofits exist to provide a social good in the community. So we are adding value and providing that social collective return on the community. So Turnstone came to us and said they saw that there was a need in their community and they weren't able to meet the need with their existing funding. So they wanted to be able to go and raise more money. This is a good one because it's data and funding, right?
I love it. Keep going. They want to make more money.
Yeah. So they wanted to be able to pull in some external funding. And so as they had some preliminary conversations with donors and potential funders, they really wanted to understand their data and their impact that they were having in the community. And so they're like many nonprofits. They have data already. They can talk about their number of surge. They can talk about completion of programs, therapy programs, other things that they're doing. And the next layer would be to roll it up and say, okay, if we do these things, what's the value, the benefit to the community to be able to do that? So we have a whole methodology that we've outlined and shared on our blog and in our client story. So I won't go through all the nuts and bolts of that, but we'll include it in the show notes so people can look at that later. But essentially, we kind of go through that same process. So we already know who the audience is, potential funders. So it has a very external facing audience, right? And we knew the data. So we were focusing in on just one of their programs. So their therapy programs for kids and adults. And then we were able to pull their data together and say, okay, what data do we have that we can, this is very quantifiable kind of rubric methodology. And then we said, okay, what does the research talk about, like the benefit of children and others who receive these services? And now that they're able to accomplish these developmental goals and milestones that they've identified in therapy, how does that benefit the community? Not only them individually, but the collective community. Yep. So then you go through and you identify what those kind of benefits are in the community and the savings that it provides in the community of like later on. So young children, maybe with developmental delays, now they're on track and they don't need, for example, remediation or additional intervention in school. So that saves a lot of money for our schools and other things like that. So we identify what's called financial proxies. I know it sounds very researchy and jargony, but there's a method and a process. And so then that helps quantify the value and then you create the method. So I think you have the numbers. I don't have it. But essentially, we found that for every dollar that is invested in providing their therapy services, there's a $3 and change return on that investment. And so we looked over a 2-year period and saw that they provided a social return on investment of $10 million. That's incredible. And so they have a big gala event. So we work to help them launch and share that data at their event. And then they've been rolling out a plan to communicate that in the community.
And now they can go to various funders and sources realistically to be able to communicate that value and the need for additional funding in order to grow that service.
So that's just like another kind of next level of how do you tell your story and using the data to kind of make the case for your support and also for like that future growth. And part of our report we talked about this is the unmet need. So it was very clear like you invest in us, this is going to add so much value in the community and let's help more people because there's this gap of people who aren't getting the services.
Right. And so I think that kind of just like sums up that part about how to go get more funding. We help bring 10 million. That's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit too. So we kind of are going through these buckets here a little bit. Help me to think through like data storytelling and grant writing. And I know grants right now are very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of feelings around them, but the reality is they're here and they're not going away. But not all grants are going away. And as your organization writes and does them, what is that data part? Because even earlier on when you were talking about data, you're like, if you're going to write grants, you got to have the data. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's great. So if we go back to like the case statement example, that's a good one to help think through, like, how do we frame our data to tell the story of need? And that's essentially kind of what a grant application is. Now, they vary depending on who you're applying for. Typically, those government grants are a lot more detailed and a lot more complicated. And then grants to different foundations tend to be less complicated. But it's almost like a business plan, if we were to make it a more generalized concept. Like you're making a case for funding this program. And that's basically what a grant application does. While they vary, there's typically some main components of a grant application. Data is important. So there's usually a statement of need. So you can imagine like you're wanting to provide a tutoring program for kids, but you're wanting to provide a tutoring program for kids. So what is the need that this tutoring program is going to meet? Is it focused on academic? And so we're working on like academic remediation. You could be even more detailed. Is it focused on reading or language literacy? Is it going to be more middle or secondary school age and there's higher level calculus or math?
Yep.
It could be language focused, whatever. But we need to have the data to say, like, there's a need here. There's data that shows maybe kids are behind. There's no other program or service meeting the need.
Right.
Does it have the demographics that you want to serve? Is there another coffee shop here? There's no other, right? So that's basically what you're doing in that statement of need. You're pulling in that external community data and also kind of doing a market research study of who else is here. And then typically somewhere in the grant application, there's going to be a section about evaluation or performance metrics, right? Because how does the funder, those who are partnering with you and giving you the money, saying, what's going to be the impact if you provide this service? So if you do this tutoring program, what's the change or impact that you're going to accomplish? Like, we're going to help kids now get at reading at grade level, right? Or we're going to increase their AP testing scores, or we're going to increase like SAT or college prep scores, or whatever that might be. And then they might have a little bit more detail of like, how are you going to do that? What's your evaluation plan? And that type of thing. So sometimes when the grant does require an evaluator, they'll hire us.
Yep.
And so we can come in and help write that evaluation plan and section for them.
Well, and just so you know, everybody who's listening, we actually have other podcasts coming out around evaluation and around outcomes and outputs and kind of some more detail around all this like data language. Mm-hmm. Because I do think, as we continue to talk, Amanda, one of the thoughts I had as your everyday nonprofit gal over here, role that I play and that I am in a lot of ways, I am thinking like, you may be convincing our listeners that, data is super important to them.
Right.
And they may already know that. And they may be already collecting that. And they may be like, okay, this is great. We got case statements and grants and one pagers. And I hear you. But like, how do I really get started into telling this story differently? Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's my question, Amanda. How do people really start thinking about their data differently than just collecting it?
Yeah, I love that, because that is one of the things that I think our colleague Amanda talks about a lot is you never want to be the best kept secret as a nonprofit in your community. And unfortunately, some of ours are, in all seriousness, people don't maybe know the great work that you are doing. And so we spend all this time collecting the data, writing these reports, and then we're not sharing it with anybody. So that's probably some of my biggest frustration is how do we make the process easier for staff at a nonprofit so that it doesn't take as much time to collect and gather this data? And then also, how do we integrate it into their process? Again, that makes it easier. It makes it more efficient. So it's not an added step. I think a lot of times we get stuck with just, it's the end of the year or the end of the program. So we got to do the report. We submit the report, we're done. Move on to the next cycle.
So what I hear you saying is it's somewhat like just business as usual, compliance data in some ways. And we're not here to cast a stone. Once again, the first thing we say all about at TCG is data is meant for learning. And it really is. And I mean, I think that's one of the things, obviously I've been here now 4 years. So, but I think, in some ways data has always kind of this, at times, a negative connotation depending on how it's used.
Right.
And we're saying, no, that's not the goal here.
Right.
And it's really not even the goal in this whole data and funding conversation. It really is meant to be a way to improve and to help your organization grow. So I think first of all, data needs to be a part of your everyday
process and not an afterthought. And I think you raised a great point here that I also just want to sit in for a minute is that we have examples of working with nonprofits where their data isn't good.
Yeah.
And so we're able then to also go to a funder or a partner and tell them that either A, they don't have a good system or process in place and they need help. And that funder wants to do that because they're a partner with them. They believe in their mission. They believe that what they're doing is good. And the nonprofit's been transparent. Sometimes I think, again, we try to hide it when we don't do well or we don't meet our targets, right? Because obviously nobody feels good about that. But if we can say we're not doing it because we don't know, we don't have the capacity or the knowledge and we need help, there are a lot of times funders and partners out there who will support you to do that.
They want to join in.
Yeah, they most partner see you as a funder. Now, not all. There are, some grants and partners who like, you got to hit these milestones. And if you don't, you might lose your funding.
Yep.
Certainly that happens. But another example too, is like I've shared both with the case statement and the grant. A lot of times you're using your data to say the story of need. So you can also say like, hey, what we're doing isn't working and we need to do things differently. We need to ramp up our programming. We need to expand our services. We need to increase maybe the dosage. That can also be a good way to make your case for support, to say, we need more money because the resources, the tools, capacity we have isn't enough. So again, they're committed to doing that. And I think if you frame it in the way that's transparent, but also has a solution, right, that can also be a good way. So certainly like, don't just only think you can only share the good data when you are hitting it out of the park, accomplishing the goals. Like the data that's not great can be just as informative and can be a great compelling case for support.
Interesting. I also like just sitting here thinking about back when I was in there, if it's not just about compliance.
Yes.
And it's not just like the good data.
Right.
I think the other thing I'm saying is, I think how do you turn it into story form?
Yeah.
And so we talked a little bit throughout all of these, like the elements of story, but I just make sure we hit that for our live audience here.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what are those elements of really good data storytelling?
Yeah. I think this is where, again, depending on the size of your organization, but we've seen, nonprofits like half a dozen staff to, nonprofits with like 70 staff, and they both have silos. It's so easy, for everybody to just kind of work in our little bubble, especially if you're a virtual remote team too, right? That's even harder at times. But we love when we're working with a client to bring in all staff together, because we truly believe it's not just the data team or the data person's job. We want to bring the program team and the development and marketing team, your people.
Yeah.
Yep. The development and marketing people are great for telling that story externally. They're the ones out there raising the funds, helping to bring in people for your services, increase enrollment, increase the participation. Typically, the program team are the ones, collecting the data. They're on the boots on the ground, frontline. So they need to know how the data is going to be used and shared.
Right.
And so, but sometimes like the schedules aren't aligned, right? Not everybody knows, what's happening when. So we don't know, there's this upcoming fundraising event, or there's like the newsletter going out, or the annual report that's getting done.
Right.
And they want data in there, or, only this data is reported or collected once a year. So figuring out when your data is coming in, when it wants to be used, then you can line up, right? So for one client, we worked with them once we started to have this schedule that we mapped out and understanding their data. We worked with their marketing and development team to say, okay, as you're promoting, the new event or the new program that's coming out, use the data. Right? Like how much more would you be likely to sign up for a program or service if you saw someone else say this was a benefit to them?
Yeah. Or you check out reviews.
Yeah.
That's a form of
data. If you, saw the result of that program and service. So don't just sign up, but like, here's a story so you can combine that testimonial of an individual, right? As well as like the total data, like people who attend this program are more likely to go to college, or, whatever that result or impact is of the program that you serve. So that has been, really helpful, I think, is just getting the staff in the room and helping to map out, this is the data we're collecting. This is when it's available, right? Or when it could be available. And then for other staff to know, okay, this is when I want to use it. We even had a program staff who also have a lot of volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
And so they do a volunteer training, and those volunteers never heard anything about the data. They didn't know, like, are they making a difference? Are they, or maybe they just heard like, we have this new training or this new thing, not because we're working to improve our results or to making this progress. So it's really important to just share your data and your results internally with people.
That engagement builds excitement.
Yes. And I think just, again, it's like we want to all be rowing together, right? So like if we have that clarity of this is the roadmap that we're on, and both also, development team to share with like program team, like we're working to raise this amount of money, or we're talking to these funders, and these are the questions they're asking. What data do we have to help, pull that in? We're working with a nonprofit and a big financial campaign of $30 million, both to expand their building, but also to expand their services in the community. And they had a fundraising consultant that they were working with, but they were like, hey, we need more data. The funders that they were preliminarily talking to had questions. So again, it goes back to that case statement, right?
Yep.
And a lot of their data that they had was more around those outputs, which I know we're going to talk about coming up here. But, they were just focusing more on like, we serve this many students, we're going to serve this many more, which that is important because it shows, that there's this reach and they are growing. But the funders were saying, well, so what?
Yeah. Is that worth 10 million, 20 million,
right.
whatever I'm trying to invest in?
When their mission is to get more students to and through college. So now they wanted to say, not only are we going to serve more, but are we going to help close the gap and get more students to and through college like that? And so they had the data.
Truly had all that.
They had all that data. We married it together. We revised their case statement with their data.
So you guys came in and really helped them like clean up that data.
Yes.
And tell that data story along with that funding story with, the fundraising consultant. And then you put that forth then to the funder.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun.
I know. That was so fun. And now it's been integrated more in the process, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just, they were just stuck.
Right.
We just talked about our data with like numbers served
and
our outputs, and they felt like that was significant. And it was, but you have to listen to what your funders and your donors are asking for. And so that's where some of this other data was just as important. I think another best practice gold star tip when you talk about like, how do you get started? I would encourage folks to look at your grant reports or your annual reports and pull out key snippets. Because can you imagine running like a social media campaign?
Yeah.
Every Monday could be like a mission moment. And so you could pull out a data point that says, here's the impact of what we have. And just take one little data point that, it's providing some really good outcome, result, impact to tell that story.
Yeah.
Take what you already have, pull it out. Because again, I think we have a lot of rich data, but we're only using it in just one lane. And so instead it can be integrated throughout our other communications.
Yeah. Like sometimes it's like in those grant reports or it's like, it's buried in those silos and not everybody even sees all that.
Yeah. And I also love, we have a whole training on this, as you know. And so I love looking at nonprofits' websites.
Yes.
It's like the nonprofit, it's your storefront to your business. And for many funders who are new to your organization and they don't know you, maybe they've heard of you, they're going to go to your website and kind of shop you around a little bit and see what are you all about. And so another gold star pro tip that I love is on your website, maybe when you have about us or even like homepage, provide, that case statement. Here's why we were formed. Here's why we exist. We're meeting in the community with your data. Here's the impact of what we're doing now to meet that need. And here's where the unmet need is. And so some people actually will have a tab on their website and it'll say impact.
Yeah.
And that just gives me chills. I'm like, the data person in me, and I want to read all about it. And they
Is that
do.
where you go first?
Oh, totally.
Okay. Sure.
Yes. Because then I'm like, I get more about their mission. I'm like, okay, this is what they're about. This is the impact, the change, the result that they're trying to accomplish and how they're wanting to move the needle in their community. And so just take your grant report data and put it up on your website.
So if we don't have an impact tab,
and
Amanda will visit it. And if it's really good, she'll take a screenshot and use it in a presentation. We'll share us one so that they can go look at it.
Yes.
Do you have one?
Yeah. Well, for data storytelling, one I'll give a shout out to is Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. They do a beautiful job of data storytelling on their website, on their social media, and across the variety of programs that they serve.
And what is it that you love about it? Like when you think about going to their website and looking at what is it that you loved?
They provide a variety of services. One, I think people think of Goodwill, that's where you go to donate your stuff, right? And nobody really thinks anything beyond that. Okay, I'm minimizing, decluttering, and that's great. But if you're in the Goodwill world, they employ a lot of individuals who are second chance citizens who maybe struggle elsewhere. They provide case management, wraparound support, and other services that really help to give people that financial stability and that freedom to go a long way. So I love how they tell that story. They do a great job of talking about and linking your donations to employment and economic impact in the community. And they also provide educational attainment through their Excel schools and other schools. And so we're talking again about employment, credentialing. They talk about the need in the communities that they serve and the impact their success has. And they do a great job of highlighting individuals for those testimonials. So you can personalize and humanize that result, but then they have the quantifiable data. And that is the formula. You want like a story with quantifiable data and then equals great storytelling, data storytelling.
Way to pass that. Do you have a smaller organization or story around somebody that maybe doesn't have all the data services or resources, Like even our friends here locally, ECR is one I was thinking about. They have that beautiful graph.
Well, you tell the story.
So we did a strategic plan project for them, and we were working with them, and they provide conflict resolution, and they work with all the schools to keep kids in school. Mm-hmm. They had just this incredible board of directors that were strong and mighty. And the strategic plan really was kind of like a rebirth for them in some ways, like what's going on next. They truly did not have a lot of staffing. Mm-hmm. But during that strategic plan process, we gave them a chart around truancy here in Wabash County and the surrounding counties. We were significantly lower. And a lot of it was able to tie back to a lot of the services that they provided. With that one chart,
we called it the money chart.
That one data point, they were able to write grants and talk to other organizations and partner with folks. They were able to increase their funding significantly for that small organization. It's one of my favorite projects that I've done since I've been here because it tells you don't have to have this entire staff. And they didn't have, all the data in the world, but they were able to take one piece of something that we were able to help them provide. Obviously, we did assist them.
Did that kind of landscape analysis and community needs.
So we were there, but they were able to take that and turn it into additional funding.
Yeah, that's such a great example too, because I think many people think, well, I don't have, the fancy data system or the visualization software, or I don't have a team member that can do it. And you don't need all of that, right? Again, you want to hone in on a few key data points that really help tell the difference of what's the need, why do you exist, and what's the unmet need, and or how are you doing really well? And in their case, there was something special happening in their community because they were there compared to all the other communities who didn't have them. So there you go. They were teed up to make that case to say, hey, fund us and we can help lower the truancy rate in your community.
And then they were working with other schools and training other people on how to do it, and they continue to grow and be successful. So I just love because it was small and they're mighty and they continue to excel. So
yeah, I love that.
Well, I think we're getting close here, Amanda. We could talk for hours. I think, honestly, just give us some wine.
I know.
Let us hang out and talk about data and really anything, honestly. So, well, I thank you all for tuning in today. And I just really appreciate you guys, joining our podcast and being a transformer.
Yes.
It really isn't just here at TCG. It's really all of you guys out there doing the day-to-day mission and the work. There's so much more to this impact that we have. And it really isn't us. We get to come alongside you, our partner with you guys, and work with you all to continue to drive your impact. And we love to do that from a data perspective. And we then do that obviously with a myriad of other services along the way. But data is probably our favorite love language here.
Yes. Well, and I know that there's always uncertain times, I think, with any organization, and especially now. And so hopefully we've given you some good tools to take back to your nonprofit and your organization to make the case for your organization, make the case for funding and for support. And so we have a lot of resources online on the website. So definitely we'll link some of the blogs to check out to get some more information.
And before we sign off, I think one of the things that I've just been thinking about when we were doing this whole thing, Amanda, really is like data isn't going away.
No.
And it's only going to get more important. I think data is going to be a piece and a secret sauce for the future.
Yeah.
And so, it's up to you all and your organization. And as individual professionals, really, myself included, before coming here, we have to challenge ourselves to reel back and start thinking about that. And how do we apply it, use it, and make that case for funding? So we wish you the best on your journey. And if we can be of help to all of you, please reach out and visit our website. And once again, cheers to you all. And I hope you guys have one less thing to whine about. Cheers, Amanda.
Cheers today.
See y'all.
See everybody.